As it has already been said, I think it was by Ambassador Jerome, Paris, Dakar, Busan, Accra, Mexico, all came, and these were major and important milestones in the development of this global partnership. But something has happened in the world in the last few months that has completely changed the playing field. And that is the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. And with that has come the huge sea change in how we're expecting the global partnership, and I'm not talking about the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, but how the global partnership for driving the 2030 Agenda is going to be characterized. So for us, this is our first big challenge. Exactly how is the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation going to sync up with the global partnership that is in place now for the 2030 Agenda? That's a question. And is the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation going to be at the core of the Global Partnership for the 2030 Agenda and the main driver of that? Do we not have a huge opportunity as the Effective Development Cooperation Partnership to provide the world a quick start in driving effective development cooperation in the context of the Sustainable Development Agenda? These are important questions that we think need to be answered in Nairobi. This has already been implicated, particularly by the Associate Administrator. But there are implications, as he clearly spells out. Because if we're going to be part of the global partnership, if we're going to be the driver of the global partnership, then we cannot be selective. We have to be universal and we have to be fully inclusive, because the 2030 Agenda is universal and is fully inclusive. And that, of course, presents a huge challenge for us moving forward. So, South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation, the Arab League and their donor arrangements, the BRICS and their arrangements, all have to find a home somehow, if we are going to be a core driver of the global partnership arrangements. So that is our first hurdle, and I think it's a hurdle, but as I've said in many other events, it's a huge opportunity that I think we need to step up to. With that, we recognize that the Addis Ababa meeting is also something that, even though it's an integral part of the 2030 Agenda, is something that we have to give special attention to. We have already seen that the Goal 17 and the Target 17.6 speaks specifically to this Global Partnership for Effective Development Agenda. That is 17.6. And the implication of that is that this partnership will have to be reporting in the context of the high-level political forum. The question is, will there be a dual track with this particular partnership, and then another reporting taking place from another global partnership driven and headquartered elsewhere? Again, it's a question. Does that make sense? So we will have to challenge the high-level political forum to maybe begin to see our partnership as the quick start, the shortcut to building, reinforcing, accelerating the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, and we become the kernel at the center of the 2030 Development Agenda Global Partnership. There are other implications that we in the Kenyan government have been grappling with. And one is that, well, it's one thing when you have a global partnership like we have now that's dealing with a budget, I think, Gina, you said 120 billion for ODA, 127, 130, 135, 160, you pick whatever billion you want. But the reality is that the 2030 Agenda isn't about billions. It's about trillions. The global economy, which is really what we're looking to drive the 2030 Agenda, the global economy, is a 300 trillion economy. And this is where the private sector comes in, because the bulk of that money will be driven by the private sector. So how are we going to position ourselves? Do we have the capability in our secretariats or secretariat? Does UNDP, OECD, and all the others have this ability to step up to this challenge? And are the donors willing to come up to the plate to finance this new capability that will have to handle trillions, not billions? I think it's a fair question, which we have to answer in Nairobi. I'm speaking fast because, 5 minutes. That in itself poses a huge challenge for us. It also means that the way in which we engage partners, including the private sector, including the civil society, including governments, and now we cannot select governments but be fully inclusive of governments, is something that we have to resolve in Nairobi. And our outcome document, which I shall be speaking to in a minute, is something that will have to reflect that. So these are the issues that we begin to see coming up in the context of the Nairobi meeting. The Nairobi meeting will be taking place at the end of the year, between the 30th of November and 1st December. And we have already set out a press release. I don't know if all of you have seen it. If not, you should ask for it. And the press release basically gives a pretty succinct idea as to what our aspirations for that process are. But we have a number of things that we shall be trying to grapple with. One, as I said, is the progress with the implementation of the unfinished business of the aid effectiveness agenda and development effectiveness commitments. So, the current way in which the Effective Development Cooperation Partnership has been running will need to be revisited, and we'll need to see whether we're making the right kind of progress in the context of aid effectiveness and the development effectiveness agenda. Two, we shall have to, as a second thing, figure out how we make the shift to the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. Three, we shall have to begin to ask ourselves how we bring in these new partners. As I said, South-South Cooperation, Triangular, and others. We shall have to ask ourselves for how we deal with the issue that was brought up by the Associate Administrator of leaving no one behind and ensuring that the LDCs, which were the core driver of the original cooperation arrangement, are not left behind in these new changes that will be coming up. And then, of course, ensuring that we go to scale, because we have to go to scale. We have no choice now. So we will be coming up with an agenda and an outcome, an agenda that reflects this challenge. To complement that agenda will also be a thematic issues that we shall be looking to deal with. The thematic issues in Nairobi will be youth, women, and I was going to say jobs because I had this conversation with the EU director, but it's not jobs. But the driver is jobs, it's private sector.
Oh yeah,
there you go. You see? So it's youth, women, and private sector. These are the three sort of thematic drivers that will be running concurrently in Nairobi to try to focus what we're doing. The private sector part is for the reasons I just gave you, and jobs. Clearly, what is the big, the big thing that will drawing youth into the mainstream of our society. Now, to do this, we have already started a process where we're putting together, and we've been consulting. You already heard Gina speak about the meeting that we had in Malawi of the steering committee. We're having this meeting. We've had some meetings at the spring meetings in DC. We shall be having a few more meetings of the steering committee during the high-level political forum in July, and we shall continue to have a series of meetings until November. And in all these meetings, we expect all these constituents who are in this room to be represented in one form or another. And we hope to be able to produce an outcome document that reflects everybody's needs, that reflects the challenge that we're facing, that tries to answer the questions that I've just posed, and that tries to come up at the end of the Nairobi process with an outcome that truly is aligned to the 2030 agenda and speaks to the SDGs, and at the same time begins to address how we can become the primary driver of the global partnership for the 2030 development agenda. It's a huge ask. It is a mammoth ask. But if we're to step up to it, we're going to have to work very, very, very shrewdly, and in fact, we're going to have to be very, very inclusive, and at the end of the day, we have no choice but to be universal. I've spoken way too fast. I don't think I've been able to include everything, but in the Q&A, I'm sure I'll be able to come up to other things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and quite a lot of energy that's already started on the way to Nairobi, and promises to even gain further momentum with Kenya's leadership, and also welcome to your colleagues from the capital. How do we then move from the global partnership to really drive the 2030 agenda? The colleagues that have spoken have given a lot of rich ideas, momentum, enthusiasm, reminded us of principles. I'd like now to open the floor, starting with 4 speakers to my right, to really give their feedback and react to these briefly to the opening remarks. And I would like to invite Mr. Haye Shute, Head of Statistics and Development Finance Division, Development Cooperation Directorate at OECD, to start. And you have, oh, I'm so sorry, 3-4 minutes. The floor is yours, Mr. Shute.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, partnership co-chairs for the leadership for the opening. Let me say that the OECD and the DAC members are really committed to support the work of the global partnership. At the recent high-level meeting, a clear statement by the members in that respect. As Ambassador Kamal was saying, and previous speakers, we are really delighted that there are multiple references to the issues of development cooperation effectiveness in the Addis Ababa action agenda. Coming to the how, as you, Chair, mentioned, I would like to share basically 4 thoughts with you. First of all, we believe that we need to continue work to provide more and better ODA to LDCs and other countries most in need. As it has been said before, the 2015 figures of ODA show that we have an increase, substantial increase in real terms of ODA, even if you disregard assistance that went to refugees at home, we still have about an increase by 2% in real terms. And maybe more importantly in that respect is the fact that we have also an increase to the ODA to least developed countries by 4%, and that is basically reversing the decline that we previously had seen, and I think it's to the commitment of the DAC members in order to reverse that trend. But quantity matters, and it's the $1 trillion issue that we, I think, all are challenged with, but quality as much. And therefore, that's the second thought I would like to share with you. Obviously, we would like to use, as DAC members, as OECD, use the current year, 2016, as the year where we try to really figure out how we can move the global commitments that we agreed upon last year into concrete actions. And let me, complementing to the principle that the Dutch co-chair issued, maybe a few very practical issues which we believe are important in order to set the incentives right. First of all, we believe that we need really leadership in regard to prioritize the issue of development cooperation really at the highest level. Secondly, we believe that monitoring, review, and the follow-up of the commitments being taken is very crucial in order to move ahead. And I think global pressure there is needed. As the Secretary to the DAC, we publish a lot, as you know. The figures are out there, very transparent, and we believe that transparency is also a way to increase this pressure to hold actors accountable. Thirdly, simple, easy-to-use results frameworks is something that need to be integrated into the existing systems and need to be aligned with the SDGs. Dedicated support, especially also to increase knowledge management about development cooperation. And then we also believe that at various levels, dedicated policy dialogues, platforms are a way to move the development effectiveness cooperation agenda forward. The third thought that I would like to share with you is as it has been mentioned, monitoring development effectiveness. The Dutch co-chair reference to the fact that the second monitor round has been launched. We are very confident that about 80 countries will participate and will provide a way to evaluate also the actions of provider countries, as also the actions and the commitment of the recipient countries. And the report is intended through a very participated open process to be ready by October this year, months prior to the high-level meeting. And the fourth thought it has been said before, we also believe that we need to have a thorough look at the way the global partnership works in order to make it relevant, even more relevant as it is. We believe that the increasing use of communities of interest that look at specific areas could be a way. Certainly the private sector needs to play an even more prominent role. We also believe that from the DAC members, development finance institutions should be integrated, not least in order to contribute to the billion to trillion story. And we all believe, and Ambassador Kamal has spelled it out, that the high-level meeting we will provide a forum to discuss this and agree on a strong agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schut, and also from OECD's perspective to cover the ODA and the importance of ODA. And it's good to note from your recent figures that despite the refugee crisis, we do see still an increase, which is very important, especially to LDCs. And also thanks for OECD's role for moving the global commitment to action, and your role in that is very critical. Thank you. And let me now invite Mr. Luca de Freya, Deputy Secretary General Action Aid, representative of the CSO Partnership for Development Effectiveness. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I'm delighted to represent today the CSO platform working with and within the GPDC. And I would like to start with this because this is definitely, as other colleagues have just highlighted, one of the added values of the GPDC, where we are, I would like to say, emphasizing this element there on equal footing. We know that in reality things are different, but when it comes to the GPDC, when it comes to the GPDC meetings, we can take the floor on equal footing, and we have a say also in the decision-making processes. And I really would like to congratulate Ambassador for his work and the level of ambitions that he has just portrayed. And I think it's right enough to be ambitious given the scale of the challenges we have discussed. And I think we have also to acknowledge the enormous pressure on GPDC for the very reasons that Ambassador Kamau described, and the need to create it and to make use of the GPDC as the space where we can bring together many other players. I think we started with that pace in Busan and Mexico, but definitely there's still a lot of work to be done in that regard. And obviously, as CSOs, NGOs really support the call for the full implementation of ODA commitments, but we're taking seriously the point that we need to go beyond ODA, and for this reason, to us, when it comes to effectiveness, we talked about the principle that should apply to all sorts of flows when it comes to development. So we think this is an extremely important point. And this point, in our view, can also be seen in the quadruple A document. And if I may, would call you not just to focus on chapter 58 on the section develop cooperation, but also in the opening sections where the document talks about the policy space for governments, or where the document talks about policy coherence. And I think all these elements actually speaking to the GPDC role. So the GPDC role in many ways is much more than just monitoring aid effectiveness, but it's really about how the quadruple A can translate into practice these very fundamental notions of country ownership or government leadership and policy space. Another added value from the CSO perspective of the GPDC is this monitoring capacity. And we need, as a GPDC community, to sell this capacity to the entire quadruple A community or SDG community, because this is already happening. We do not have to start from scratch. The numbers are huge, 80 countries. We have something like 60 CSO focal points involved. I'm not saying this is perfect, but this is happening and we need to value these elements. And I have noted, preparing for this conversation, just a few more ideas. And some concerns about the scenario that we have outlined in many conversations. The many options will be bigger than we had in the past. It's going to be a very interesting side event tomorrow or the day after tomorrow by our colleagues from ODI. But we have to be careful, in our view, that they kind of may generate greater fragmentation. And fragmentation is one of the conditions that may undermine capacity of governments to lead and the policy space. Last but not least, obviously we do believe that everyone around this table has a role to play, the private sector, CSOs. I think it's possibly time to have a fresh look at the notion of multi-stakeholder partnerships, because we have to acknowledge that this technology is being used in many ways, and we need to assert as a GPDC that multi-stakeholder partnerships are partnerships where all actors have a say on equal footing again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good to hear a perspective, a fresh perspective from civil society and tremendous role that civil society plays in this agenda. And we look forward to obviously working very closely with all the actors, as we've said. Let me now turn to invite Ms. Louise Cantrell, Permanent Representative of the International Chamber of Commerce to the United Nations, to share her perspective and reflections on the interventions made previously. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indeed, the International Chamber of Commerce has been privileged to coordinate the business engagement in some of the very key monumental multilateral agreements that transpired in 2015, starting in Sendai, moving to Addis, then to the 2030 agenda here in New York and the Climate Accord in December. So there's a long history of business engaging with the United Nations at the global level on these important developments. And there also is a long legacy of business engaging over the 14-year period of the evolution of the aid effectiveness agenda. In fact, the International Chamber of Commerce was present in Paris, in Accra, in Busan, and in Mexico. But truly, the evolution of a constructive engagement with the private sector really dates from Busan, when there was a conscientious outreach to business and the private sector to see how we could come together to really improve the effectiveness of development cooperation. So this meeting here today is critically important, and to see how we have the convergence with the 2030 agenda. And I would say if we all just look around the room and to see that this is standing room only, I think it attests to the fact that this is indeed an important meeting. Just to say that also, I'm pleased to say that there are many colleagues from the business community at the table here today, which again is testament to your inclusiveness and your eagerness to have the business sector part of the discussion and part of the solution, so to speak. I would say since the 2030 Accord in September, both the UN and all of the key stakeholders are trying to become fit for purpose. And what does that mean? Let me share with you from the perspective of the business sector, a lot is taking place. From the large multinational down to the small SME. In terms of the large multinationals, there are mapping exercises going on to see where, in fact, the 17 goals and targets fit in with the core business activities of the multinationals. From moving down the chain, so to speak, there is organizations such as my own, the International Chamber of Commerce, are preparing tools. So to raise awareness among the business community about the role that they play in terms of their contribution to the 2030 agenda, but also more practical things about how they can adjust their business practices to becoming more sustainable and to become more responsible citizens in society. In terms of the monitoring, now the UN at the global level is putting into place a very robust review and monitoring regime in terms of the HLPF. As Ambassador Kamau rightly said, this process of becoming fit for purpose within the UN is trying to see how do the various strains feed into the role that the HLPF will play. It's not even clear yet how the FFD process will feed into the HLPF. Partnerships. There seems to be a provision being made in the SG's report on review and follow-up for partnerships to report on their contribution to the 2030 agenda. So does that mean that the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation will be that piece there? I think that's something for everyone to consider and to see how we can put some clarity around, as my colleague just said, what do multi-stakeholder partnerships mean and how will they report on their contribution? But I am encouraged by many events and activities. There is recognition that we need to go from billions to trillions. To get there, engagement with the private sector is going to be critically important. From the side of the private sector, I can tell you that there is a sincere willingness to be part of the solution and to be part of this journey that we are all going to go on together. Business recognizes that it cannot succeed in societies that fail. Governments recognize that they need to also deliver for their citizens. And part of that is to be able to create the jobs and to create the environment where business will thrive. And so for business in the whole 2030 evolution of the SDGs, and I have often said that the true rock star of the 2030 agenda is Ambassador Kamau. And we are and to that end, I'm encouraged that he's leading this process now, and that I have full confidence that he understands the importance of engaging with the private sector right from the outset, and including, which is different from other Busan, for example. On Busan, we were there, but we were on the margins. Here, I feel as if there is a sincere effort to make business part of the HLM2 right from the beginning. And I can share with you that we are already undertaking to engage with our business colleagues, both in terms of the Global Business Alliance for 2030, the Business Sector Steering Committee for FFD, and all of the business people engaged in the climate negotiations. So we're putting together a robust group. So just to let you know that I think that we all recognize the importance of this meeting, we see how important it is to be part of the 2030 agenda, and you can be sure that you have business from our side to engage.
Thank you very much for those wise and inspiring comments from the business sector. And it's just unbelievable how it is different. The engagement is different. And as you said, when multinationals look at the SDGs and try to identify how they can support, it's a new way of working with countries and with the United Nations. So we really look forward to leveraging ODA to bring those partners around the table. The last speaker, and then we'll open up to the broader audience, is Mr. Klaus Hauser. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce it as well as Acting Director General for International Cooperation and Development from the European Commission. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being able to talk a little bit about this global partnership for effective development cooperation. Let's face it, this is a new kid on the block. This is only 4 years old, and I think we should always keep that in mind when we talk about it. But we do believe firmly, both at the Commission and also I think in the EU as a whole, that there is a great potential in this global partnership. That's why we are a very strong supporter of it. Let me just explain in 4 points why we think there is a lot of potential in it, and maybe also what we still need to do to actually realize that potential. First point is, this is very relevant for the SDG agenda, for the implementation of the SDG agenda. This is the place where, and this comes from Busan, and therefore it is very mandated. There's a long history of technical discussion on how to make change work and how to implement change. And this is what the Global Partnership brings to the implementation of SDGs. So there is experience, just for an example, the monitoring that we are doing in the Global Partnership is a very good forerunner for the monitoring that we will have to do under the SDGs. And the principles from Busan on transparency, on results, on ownership and many others are going to be very relevant for the SDG implementation. In particular, the last one, ownership. We have changed the paradigm now between from a north-south to a together, to doing things together, and therefore without ownership the SDGs will not fly. So we bring this real experience to the SDGs. Secondly, I think that this global partnership is also relevant still for conventional development cooperation. Let's face it, this is not finished because we have the SDGs now, and it is relevant still because there's a lot, and relevant in particular for donors or development partners, because there's a lot of unfinished business from the Busan agenda. There are a lot of things that we have not yet done. We discussed this also in the DAC, in the OECD, but the real new thing here is that we discuss it together with the developing countries, and for that I think that's the other very big added value, is really with private sector and civil society, so that we basically have all stakeholders on board. And again, this works much better in the global partnership than I think it works for the moment still in the DAC, because there is more participation, it's a different setup and so on. So that's why I think that the global partnership is relevant both for the SDGs and for development policy and development cooperation as such. Now, what do we need to do? First of all, we need to confirm this potential. This has to be visible to the outside. I said this is a new kid on the block, so we still have to confirm it. And this is where Nairobi, where the high-level meeting comes in. In Mexico, we already had the possibility to showcase a number of things, but I think the much better opportunity now will be at the high-level meeting in Nairobi, and I'm very confident that with the dynamism of the co-chairs and of Ambassador Kamau and his authorities, this will actually be the case, especially if we manage to really involve all those who already work on these questions practically day to day, and who can show that if you apply the Busan principles, you actually get further and you get better results. So this is, I think, why we can really confirm the value of the partnership in Nairobi. And then finally, let's face it, we need to strengthen this global partnership still. And that means we need to invest into it, both development partners but also private sector and civil society really need to invest in it and need to show that they believe in it. And that means, amongst others, broaden the participation to some of the countries, especially emerging those that are not yet so much on board. And again, I hope that our Kenyan hosts can do a lot to bring the emerging partners on board. You have probably a better access to that than we do. So let's try to use that. But also to still bring the stakeholders more on board, the private sector it still needs to be brought into this in a more operational way. And then we also need to establish a suitable link with the UN, because let's face it, this is currently outside of the UN, but there are differences and they need to be taken into account. As I said, this is an operational partnership. There is no such body, no such operational body within the UN system. So we have to make sure that this finds a place in the UN architecture and it's being recognized for the added value it has. And I think if we can also manage that, then we can also maybe take out some of the, I don't know, tensions, irritations that have existed in the past. So this is something we have to do. And that leads us back to what Ambassador Kamau said about rethinking certain things and trying to engage with various actors so that we can indeed confirm that this partnership is relevant and that we should continue to invest into it. And we will be there.
Thank you very much. I think that confirming the potential, strengthening the partnership, linking to the UN, we're seeing some general things coming out from most of our speakers. As we only have about 8 minutes, I'd like to open up the floor for questions and comments to our speakers. And let's take the two colleagues there. If you can introduce yourselves, please.
Thank you very much. Elisa Pritzon from the Overseas Development Institute. I would like to raise a question and then have a comment. First of all, is picking up the kind of first intervention, whether and how should the principles on aid effectiveness and development effectiveness evolve? Look at how they kind of introduced the side event that ODI UNDP is organizing for tomorrow at 6 p.m. where we're going to kind of present a new report looking at the perspective of recipient countries on development finance. And we asked, including Mr. Kinyanjoi's staff in Nairobi last year, about the preferences for development finance. There are two elements that are very kind of relevant for the aid effectiveness agenda, which is still ownership, we just heard it, alignment to national priorities. But the third one that is not kind of included in the principles is speed of delivery. So kind of looking for development results to be achieved as quickly as possible. The second point, very briefly, is just a comment. I mean, again, we call the report an age of choice for development finance because indeed, all in all, partner countries' governments do have more options to finance their national development strategies than ever before. However, while we kind of heard about statistics on philanthropic organizations, we need to kind of separate the hype from reality. I mean, there are certain flows, such as the case of philanthropic assistance, that cannot be accessed by developing countries, by big figures at the global level, but very kind of low flow. So certainly there's a scope to kind of take the recipient perspective and look at what actually these countries can reap. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Let's take two more questions.
Okay. Barbara Samuels, the Global Clearinghouse for Development Finance. And as a banker, I want to put on the table, how do we get the quick start that you suggest? And how do we go from billions to trillions? And if we listen to the heads of the multilateral development banks, the World Bank Infrastructure Forum, what word did they use? And we actually got it into the AAA, investability, bankability. So while of course I concur with my colleague Louise, I think the challenge is this partnership you have is phenomenally strong because it's country-based. But where do we get bankability? It is practical and it is technical and it is at a project level, whether that be an essential public service for water and sanitation and SME, putting together mini hydro. Those are the realities of how we go from billions to trillions. So that means taking the very valuable concepts that you have as the basis and really doing a paradigm shift. Because it means we coordinate at the level of an investable entity, whether that be a project, a company, a fund, an instrument. It means when we talk about inclusiveness, that it isn't just us sitting around the table, but who delivers on projects. It's financial advisors, it's experts in water and sanitation, it's environmental engineers. If we don't, what country has ever developed and met the SDGs? It doesn't have its own expert professionals to deliver. When we talk about knowledge sharing, it isn't just up here in the abstract. It's how do you do a legal contract that sets up a special purpose vehicle? How do you negotiate to actually get a vendor to help you? And working on the ground with cooperatives, 30,000 farmers to do milk processing in Uganda. This is where we have failures in the development community because development partners with governments don't coordinate. So I know we don't have time, but if this is where you want to go, I think this is where you can deliver, and there are very technical things that we can get done. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for perhaps one more question. I'd like to take this opportunity to also thank the Associate Administrator and Undersecretary General of UNDP, who is leaving for another meeting across the street. So I want to just perhaps, if there are no other comments from the floor, turn it back to our Global Partnership co-chairs and the second high-level meeting host for just 1 minute final comments, if you have any. If not, we can also wrap it up. Ambassador?
Well, very, very quickly. First of all, just to thank everybody for the comments and for being here to listen to us. I realize we didn't give you much of a chance to say very much. But I do want to single out a couple of things. One is what Luca had to say. I do share your concern about this fragmentation issue. It's a real problem. I don't know how we're going to resolve this. There are too many people wanting to report. It really is. And everybody's coming up with their own report and their own system and their own this. I worry about this because for developing countries it's going to be a nightmare, let alone for the entire system. Secondly, I do want to, the last speaker, I'm sorry, I forget your name.
Barbara Salmon.
Barbara, just to say that I couldn't agree with you. I want to refer you very quickly to two things that are going on. One is the UNEP, the financial system we need, aligning the financial system with sustainable development. Very exciting report that I would recommend to everybody. It's a UNEP inquiry report that is really beginning to show how the financial systems and business can actually begin to drive sustainable development. Very important out there, and I would recommend you. And we in Kenya believe that the PPPs, the private-public partnerships, are the quickest way to get this, the whole thing on the road. Working between governments, private sector, civil society, communities, and getting that all sorted out. But I do agree with you, it remains a huge challenge as how to resolve that. But all in all, to say that we as hosts are very excited about this process. We worry that, and we think we need to resolve this in the next few months, and I look to the co-chairs now, that we are going to have to decide whether we want to remain an ODA focused process, which we might have to because of the magnitude of the challenge of the full, multi-trillion-dollar undertaking. I don't know. This is a decision that we're going to have to come to. If we go the other way, it does mean a fundamental re-engineering and a revisiting of the mandate and all that, which we are happy to do. We'll be more than excited to see that happen. But I wonder whether we can pull this little stunt off. If we can, it'll be fantastic. But that's just by way of saying Kenya is ready, Kenya is willing, Kenya wants this to succeed, And we hope that everybody will be there and will stay with us on the journey to defining this outcome, because we're working on it over the next 2 or 3 months. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Kassar?
Thank you so much. And again, Ambassador Kamau, your passion gives clearly the idea that Nairobi is going to succeed. But thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. I think you said something very important, is where the pieces fit in this big puzzle. And I'm always thinking about where GPDC fits, global partnership, as you mentioned. I don't know what is global partnership. Sorry, because it's global partnership is like a concept, and at least GPDC is something landed. You can grab it. So I think that is a really important thing. Why we don't have a principle about fast delivery, or how do you say? Yeah, speed of delivery. That I really like that concept. In my past, I did a lot for that. But I think if we talk about effectiveness, we're talking about that. And what this offers is a predictability that it's really important in order to deliver fast. So we have some concepts, but it's well taken. And in terms of monitoring, I know that it's very cumbersome, all reportings, we have too many, but this one in particular, I think is really focused. I can share with you my experience from Mexico, that has a dual character, because we are recipients and we also offer. We're having a very difficult time to do it, but I think it's going to be very interesting on how countries that are not not recipients, how they're going to do. But it's really focused, so I invite you to see and also to have your input to how we're trying to do this focused, efficient, and effectiveness. And the other thing is private sector. I'm leading a cooperation agency, and it's so difficult in triangular cooperation. Tege was talking about 2 countries and 1 multilateral organization, but we also have a private sector. And I don't know what's happening, but we need to improve in the challenge of how to approach the private sector from the international cooperation agencies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gina. Ambassador Verhoeven, you have the last word.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, a few points in reaction. But first of all, I talked about the importance of learning and the importance of learning through the Global Partnership on Effective Development Cooperation. It seems that in organizing these kind of side events, we never learn, that we have so huge panels that we never have time for questions and answers. So I do apologize for not learning on this. And I hope that we can improve the learning on development effectiveness. 3 points on the comments made. First of all, on the principles, the point you made. I think that we need to review the principles in view of the SDG agenda. I guess that the adage that is central in the SDG agenda, leave no one behind, requires us to review the principles and maybe not only look at speed of delivery, but also at other issues. How do you program, how do you plan, and do you plan with the most needy as first in mind? So that's something we need to review, absolutely. Second, multi-stakeholder partnerships. I completely agree, and it is one of the sessions that we scheduled for the high-level meeting. What we are doing right now within the Global Partnership is mainly looking at the environment for multi-stakeholder partnership. What is the environment, the space for civil society to work on development? What is the environment, the business climate, the space for the private sector to work on development? So that is what we are focusing at right now. But we would like to take this a step further. If we talk about effectiveness, then you also need to see how you can organize multi-stakeholder partnerships in a way that they are effective contributors to development. And that is the next step that we want to take with the global partnership. So yes, we are taking that challenge up. Finally, scaling up of resources, also the challenge that Ambassador Kamal made. I think we need to have a good debate about that. There are others that are working on the issue of scaling up resources. It's mainly the multilaterals, the multilateral development banks that are doing that. So we need to see whether there is a scope for us to work on this. But when we talk about scaling up, it is on the one hand bigger, but it's also better. And I see our role mainly in this area of better, trying to provide better cooperation. And if we can contribute to the bigger, even better, but focusing on better would be my preference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a very rich discussion. I'm sorry we didn't have a chance to hear more from others, but I hope you have heard enough to encourage you to move forward and keep the dialogue moving to the Nairobi meeting. Everything we've heard today about the global partnership, the inclusive nature, the voluntary nature, the principles, and supporting the means of implementation and how relevant it is to the SDGs, and especially SDG 17. I'm so confident that with the leadership of our co-chairs and our ambassador and host country, Kenya, that it's going to occupy a huge role in the years to come. And I think this is an exciting beginning, and you can see all the commitment, as we said, standing room only. So thank you to each one of our speakers, co-chairs, and to our ambassador from Kenya.